The Statue of Liberty stands in New York Harbor, one of the most recognized symbols in the world. The copper-green patina, the spiked crown, the torch held high above the waves. Over 135 years of American history have unfolded beneath her gaze. But before she was an American icon, before she represented immigration and the American dream, she was an idea born in French political turmoil. The statue rose slowly from concept to reality, a gift from the people of France to the people of America. The work took years. The vision came from complex political motivations, both spoken and unspoken. This is the story of how the Statue of Liberty was conceived, the political movements that determined its creation, the French sculptor who designed it, the fundraising campaigns that paid for it, the engineers and metal workers, the immigrants and laborers who turned copper sheets and iron supports into a colossus, the journey across the Atlantic, the pedestal that almost wasn't built, the statue's changing meaning over time. The monument's history is complicated. It was created during a period when both France and America were redefining their notions of liberty. The different interpretations of freedom are part of the story, neither to be ignored nor sensationalized, but understood as historical fact. The Statue of Liberty took shape between 1875 and 1886 with major renovations since. Understanding how and why it was built requires understanding the nations that created it, the ideologies, the constraints, the ambitions, all shaped the monument that emerged. If you're interested in the complex history behind America's most famous symbol of freedom and how it reflects the relationship between two nations, please consider subscribing. I would also appreciate your comments if you have additional insights or historical details about the Statue of Liberty's creation and meaning. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Seeds of Liberty, the French Connection. The Statue of Liberty emerged from complex political soil in post-imperial France. After the fall of Napoleon III in 1870 and the crushing of the Paris Commune in 1871, France struggled with its identity and future. The newly formed Third Republic stood on uncertain ground, its republican values contested by monarchists who still held significant power. Within this turbulent landscape, the idea for a monumental gift to America took root. Edouard de La Boulaye, a prominent legal scholar and ardent admirer of American democracy, first proposed the concept. In 1865, at a dinner gathering of French Republicans at his home near Versailles, La Boulaye suggested that France might commemorate the upcoming American centennial with a suitable monument. The Civil War had just ended, and La Boulaye saw in Union victory a triumph of democratic principles over slavery, a cause he had long supported. If a monument should rise in the United States, La Boulaye reportedly said, as a memorial to their independence, I should think it only natural if it were built by united effort, a common work of both our nations. This statement carried multiple layers of meaning. On its surface, it proposed friendship between republics. Beneath, it contained French Republicans' aspirations for their own nation. By celebrating American liberty, they could indirectly criticize the authoritarian tendencies still present in their homeland. Among the dinner guests was the young Alsatian sculptor Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi, who found himself captivated by La Boulaye's vision. The idea would simmer for years before gaining momentum after France's transition to republican government in the 1870s. The statue's conception was not simply an act of international goodwill. It served strategic purposes for French Republicans like La Boulaye, who sought to strengthen the Republican cause at home by associating it with the successful American experiment. By celebrating American freedom, they could advance their own political agenda without directly confronting domestic opponents. The American Civil War had particular resonance. La Boulaye had closely followed the conflict, publishing a 3-volume history of the United States. He saw the Union victory as vindication of democratic principles and the abolition of slavery as fulfillment of the promise of liberty. The proposed monument would tacitly connect French Republicans to these triumphant ideals. What began as political strategy would evolve into something more profound. The seed planted at La Boulaye's dinner table would grow into the most recognizable symbol of American freedom, though its French roots and original meanings would gradually fade from public memory. Chapter 2. Frederick Auguste Bartholdi, the artist's vision. Frederick Auguste Bartholdi was born in Colmar, Alsace, in 1834. Trained at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, he developed an early fascination with monumental sculpture. His artistic vision combined neoclassical training with romantic sensibilities, creating works of technical precision and symbolic power. By his 30s, Bartholdi had established himself as a sculptor of note, with public commissions throughout France. The idea of creating colossal monuments had captured Bartholdi's imagination well before Laboulaye's dinner party. In 1855 and 1856, he traveled to Egypt, where the ancient monuments left a profound impression. The massive scale of Egyptian architecture and sculpture, structures designed to last millennia, influenced his artistic ambitions permanently. In 1869, Bartholdi proposed a colossal lighthouse for the entrance of the Suez Canal. The planned sculpture, a robed female fella holding aloft a torch, bore striking similarities to what would later become Liberty. The Egyptian project, titled Egypt Bringing Light to Asia, was rejected by the Khedive of Egypt as too expensive, but Bartholdi preserved the concept. When France's political climate shifted toward republicanism in the early 1870s, Laboulaye revived the monument idea. Bartholdi traveled to America in 1871 to scout locations and build political support. He arrived in New York Harbor and immediately identified Bedloe's Island as the ideal setting for his colossus. The statue must rise at the threshold of the country, Bartholdi wrote in his notes. I saw the location in a flash, the entrance to the harbor of New York. During his 6-week American journey, Bartholdi met prominent figures including President Ulysses S. Grant, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and Horace Greeley. He sketched preliminary designs and studied American tastes and sensibilities. His travels took him west to San Francisco, allowing him to understand the scale and character of the nation that would receive his work. Returning to France, Bartholdi developed detailed drawings and models. The figure evolved from earlier concepts, becoming more distinctly allegorical. Liberty would wear a crown of 7 rays, representing the 7 seas and 7 continents. Her right arm would extend upward, holding a torch. Her left would cradle a tablet inscribed with the date of American independence, July 4th, 1776. By 1873, Bartholdi had completed a 4-foot plaster model capturing the statue's essential form. The Franco-American Union was established the same year to raise funds for construction. Bartholdi's vision was taking tangible shape, moving from concept toward reality through careful planning and artistic refinement. Chapter 3: Designing a Colossus. Engineering Challenges. Creating a statue of unprecedented scale presented extraordinary engineering challenges. Bartholdi recognized that traditional sculpture techniques would prove insufficient for a monument standing 151 feet tall. The statue would need to withstand Atlantic gales, the corrosive effects of salt air, and the structural stresses of its own massive weight. These requirements demanded innovative solutions beyond artistic considerations. In 1875, Bartholdi engaged Alexandre Gustave Eiffel, already renowned for his railway bridges and iron structures, to design the internal framework. Eiffel, who would later create his eponymous tower, approached the problem with mathematical precision. Rather than making the statue solid or relying on a central support, Eiffel designed a skeleton of iron trusses that would support the copper skin while allowing it to move independently. The framework featured a central pylon of 4 iron columns supporting a secondary skeleton of flat iron bars. This design created an incredibly strong yet flexible structure that could withstand wind pressure and temperature-induced expansion. Measurements indicated the torch could sway up to 3 inches in strong winds without structural damage, a necessary accommodation for a harbor-based monument. For the exterior, Bartholdi selected copper sheets of 3/32 of an inch thickness. The metal was thin enough to be workable, yet durable enough to withstand decades of exposure. The craftsman employed the technique of repoussé, hammering the copper sheets from within against molds to create the desired shapes. This ancient metalworking method had never before been attempted on such massive scale. Each copper sheet was carefully shaped to match plaster section models that Bartholdi had divided into 300 separate pieces. The numbering system ensured each segment would align correctly during final assembly. Workers created wooden molds for each section, then hammered the copper against these forms to create the precise curves and details of drapery, facial features, and the crown's rays. The connection between copper skin and iron framework required special consideration. Direct contact between dissimilar metals would cause galvanic corrosion, where one metal deteriorates when in contact with another in the presence of an electrolyte. To prevent this, Eiffel specified asbestos cloth soaked in shellac as an insulating barrier between the copper and iron, a solution that proved remarkably effective. Scale models tested the design at various stages. A 4-foot model gave way to a 9-foot version, followed by a 36-foot model. Each iteration refined both artistic vision and engineering solutions, allowing problems to be identified and resolved before full-scale construction began. The engineering achievements pioneered in the Statue of Liberty would influence construction techniques for decades, demonstrating how artistic vision and technical innovation could combine to overcome seemingly impossible challenges. Chapter 4: Funding Freedom. Popular subscription. The Statue of Liberty's creation faced financial obstacles as formidable as its engineering challenges. The agreement between French and American committees established that France would fund the statue itself while Americans would provide the pedestal. Both nations turned to public subscription rather than government funding, making Liberty truly a monument built by the people. In France, fundraising began in 1875 under the Franco-American Union, with Laboulaye as president. Initial enthusiasm generated substantial donations from wealthy individuals and institutions, but these proved insufficient for the massive undertaking. The estimated cost for the French portion approached 400,000 francs, an enormous sum in the post-war French economy. The Franco-American Union devised creative fundraising methods. Public exhibitions charged admission to view the developing work, commemorative items were sold, miniature statues, medallions, and engravings, providing both funding and publicity. The Paris Opera hosted benefit performances, directing proceeds to the Statue Fund. Lotteries were organized, offering paintings donated by prominent artists as prizes. French citizens from all classes contributed. School children donated copper coins. Factory workers pooled resources for collective donations. Bartholdi himself traveled throughout France, giving lectures and soliciting contributions. The French press published regular updates on the fund's progress, maintaining public interest and encouraging further donations. By 1879, French fundraising remained incomplete. The economic depression of 1873 continued to hamper efforts. Construction proceeded nonetheless, with Bartholdi advancing work on completed sections while fundraising continued for others. This strategy allowed visible progress that stimulated additional donations. In America, the fundraising situation proved even more challenging. The American Committee, headed by William Evarts, struggled to generate public interest. Many Americans viewed the pedestal as a local New York concern rather than a national project. Congress rejected proposals for federal funding, citing financial constraints following the Panic of 1873. The pedestal, designed by architect Richard Morris Hunt, would require substantial funds, approximately $125,000. Initial fundraising yielded only a fraction of this amount. By 1884, with the statue nearing completion in France, the American Committee had managed to raise less than halfway toward their goal. The American fundraising methods mirrored those in France: benefit concerts, auctions, and exhibition fees. Theatrical performances dedicated proceeds to the pedestal fund. Art exhibitions showcased the statue's design and progress. Commemorative items sold at premium prices, with purchasers conscious that their money supported the monument's completion. The funding challenges revealed contrasting attitudes toward public works in the two republics. While France embraced the project as a national undertaking, America's tradition of limited government and local responsibility created obstacles that would nearly prevent the statue's erection, leaving Liberty's future uncertain as construction in France neared completion. Chapter 5: Building Liberty. The Paris Workshops. Construction of the Statue of Liberty began in 1875 in the workshops of Gagé Gauthier and Carmers in Paris. The facility, located in the 17th arrondissement, specialized in copper work but had never attempted a project of such magnitude. The workshop space required significant expansion to accommodate the statue's enormous components, with new wooden structures erected specifically for Liberty's creation. The workforce consisted of approximately 100 skilled French metalworkers, carpenters, and laborers. Many were master craftsmen with decades of experience in metalworking traditions. The copper sheets arrived at the workshops in rectangular pieces measuring approximately 3 feet by 5 feet. Before shaping could begin, the sheets required cleaning and preparation to ensure proper malleability and surface quality. The construction process followed a precise sequence. First, Bartholdi's staff created a series of increasingly larger models. The 4-foot model gave way to a 9-foot version, which was then enlarged to a 36-foot plaster model. This final model was divided into sections, with each section carefully measured and mapped. Workers then created exact plaster molds of each section, which would serve as forms for shaping the copper sheets. The repoussé technique demanded extraordinary skill. Workers placed copper sheets against wooden forms carved to match the plaster molds. They then hammered the copper from within, gradually forcing it to take the precise curves and details required. The hammering created the distinctive surface texture still visible on the statue today. For areas requiring particularly fine detail, such as the face, specialized metal punches and hammers allowed craftsmen to create subtle contours. Each completed copper section received an identification number that corresponded to its position in the final assembly. The numbering system, essential for the eventual reconstruction in America, used a combination of letters and numbers to indicate both the horizontal and vertical position of each piece. As sections were completed, they were temporarily assembled within the workshop to verify proper fit. By 1876, portions of the statue were sufficiently complete to be exhibited. The arm holding the torch was displayed at the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia, where visitors could climb a ladder to the balcony in the torch for a small fee. Funds directed to the pedestal construction. By 1878, the head and shoulders were complete enough for public exhibition in Paris. The massive copper face, with its serene expression and distinctive crown, stood in the gardens of the Champ de Mars during the Paris World's Fair, drawing thousands of visitors daily. These exhibitions served dual purposes, testing the assembly methods while generating public interest and additional funds. The copper work continued systematically from 1878 through 1884, section by section, from the base upward. The complete statue finally stood assembled in Paris by July 1884, a remarkable achievement of craftsmanship and persistence after 9 years of labor. Chapter 6. A Pedestal in Peril, America's Responsibility. While the statue neared completion in France, the American pedestal project faltered. By 1882, the American Committee had selected a design by noted architect Richard Morris Hunt, who offered his services without fee. The pedestal would stand 89 feet tall, constructed of concrete faced with granite. The massive foundation required excavation 16 feet deep into the Oise, bedrock of Bedloes Island. General Charles P. Stone, an engineer and Civil War veteran, oversaw construction. Work began in April 1883 with the clearing and excavation of the fort that previously occupied the island. The foundation alone required 20,000 cubic yards of concrete, creating what was then the largest concrete mass ever poured in the United States. The mixture contained Portland cement imported from Europe, as American manufacturers had not yet mastered its production. The pedestal design featured classical Doric elements with symbolic American motifs. Hunt created a structure that would complement Bartholdi's statue while establishing its own architectural presence. The massive granite blocks came from quarries in Leeds Island, Connecticut, with each stone precisely cut to fit its position in the structure. By 1884, the foundation was complete, but the pedestal itself had risen only a few feet. The American Committee's funds were exhausted, with less than half the needed amount raised. Construction halted. In France, the statue stood fully assembled in Paris, ready for dismantling and shipment, but with no completed pedestal awaiting it in New York. The American Committee, facing financial failure, considered reducing the pedestal's size or relocating the statue to Philadelphia. Boston, or San Francisco, cities that had offered to fund a pedestal if the statue were redirected to them. New York risked losing the monument it had been promised. In March 1885, Joseph Pulitzer, publisher of the New York World newspaper, launched an unprecedented fundraising campaign. Pulitzer's approach targeted ordinary Americans rather than the wealthy elite who had thus far failed to provide sufficient funds. "The world is the people's paper," Pulitzer wrote in an editorial, "and now it appeals to the people to come forward and raise the money that the rich declined to give." He promised to print the name of every contributor, regardless of the amount donated. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 5 months, the campaign raised over $100,000, with most donations under $1. School children collected pennies. Working-class immigrants contributed portions of their meager wages. More than 120,000 contributors were listed in the world's pages, making the pedestal truly a creation of the American people. Construction resumed in August 1885. Stonemasons worked through winter to complete the structure by April 1886, racing to prepare for the statue's arrival and erection. The pedestal, once threatened by neglect, now stood ready to receive liberty. Chapter 7: Atlantic Crossing, Disassembly, and Journey. With both statue and pedestal nearing completion, attention turned to the monumental challenge of transporting liberty across the Atlantic. In January 1885, workers began the careful dismantling of the completed statue in Paris. The copper skin and iron framework were separated, with each piece meticulously labeled according to the comprehensive numbering system developed during construction. The statue's 350 copper segments were packed into 214 wooden crates, specially constructed to protect the delicate copper sheets during ocean transport. The iron framework, disassembled into separate trusses and beams, required additional crates, bringing the total to 350. The complete shipment weighed over 200 tons, presenting significant logistical challenges for transportation. The French government provided the frigate Isère for the transatlantic voyage. The vessel, a 3-masted ship measuring 210 feet in length, was modified to accommodate the unusually shaped cargo. Loading the crates required careful planning, with weight distribution across the ship's hold being essential for stability during the ocean crossing. On May 21, 1885, the Isère departed from Rouen, France, carrying liberty in pieces. The vessel traveled down the Seine River to the Atlantic, then began the ocean crossing. The journey took 27 days, facing moderate Atlantic storms that tested the ship's stability. The captain maintained a cautious speed, averaging 8 knots, to ensure the safety of the precious cargo. The Isère arrived in New York Harbor on June 17th, greeted by naval salutes and a flotilla of smaller vessels. Contemporary accounts describe thousands of spectators lining the battery and harbor shorelines to witness the arrival. The ship anchored in the upper bay, where it would remain during the unloading process. Transferring the crates from ship to shore presented the next challenge. Barges were positioned alongside the Isère, and each crate was carefully hoisted from the hold using the ship's derricks. The operation took 5 days to complete, with work continuing from dawn until dusk. The barges then transported the crates to Bedloes Island, where they were offloaded using temporary wooden piers constructed specifically for this purpose. By June 25th, all crates had been transferred to the island. They were arranged in numbered sequences around the partially completed pedestal to facilitate systematic unpacking and assembly. The crates remained sealed, protected by tarpaulins, until the pedestal reached sufficient completion to begin installation of the iron framework. The journey represented a remarkable logistical achievement. No significant damage occurred to the statue components during transport, despite the ocean crossing and multiple transfers. The careful packing, labeling, and handling ensured that Liberty's pieces, some weighing several tons, others delicately shaped and vulnerable to deformation, arrived intact and ready for the final phase of the project, reassembly on American soil. Chapter 8: Rising. From the harbor. Assembly in America. Assembly of the Statue of Liberty began in April 1886 as the pedestal neared completion. The process followed the reverse sequence of disassembly in Paris, with the iron framework erected first, followed by attachment of the copper skin. The work required coordination between American construction crews and French technicians who had participated in the original assembly. 4 massive iron girders were first installed atop the pedestal, forming the primary connection between statue and base. These girders extended 90 feet downward through channels built into the pedestal, anchoring the statue securely to its foundation. Once these primary supports were secured, workers began erecting the central iron pylon designed by Eiffel. The central pylon consisted of 4 vertical columns connected by horizontal struts, creating a rigid backbone for the statue. As the pylon rose, workers installed secondary support beams radiating outward from this central structure. The installation required precision placement of thousands of rivets, with each connection carefully aligned to ensure proper weight distribution. Weather conditions on Bedloes Island complicated the assembly. Strong harbor winds frequently halted work on the upper portions when gusts exceeded 20 miles per hour. Spring rains delayed riveting operations, as wet metal prevented proper joining. The exposed harbor location meant workers contended with both heat and humidity during summer months. Scaffolding surrounded the growing framework, rising in stages as the structure gained height. The temporary wooden platforms provided access for workers installing the framework and later the copper skin. The scaffold design required careful engineering to withstand harbor winds while supporting the weight of workers and materials. By June 1886, the framework stood complete, rising 151 feet from the pedestal's top to the torch. Installation of the copper skin began immediately. Workers started at the bottom, attaching copper sections to the framework using specially designed copper saddles that allowed for thermal expansion and contraction without creating stress on the metal sheets. The numbered sections were unpacked sequentially and hoisted into position using block and tackle systems. Each piece required fine adjustments to align perfectly with adjacent sections. Workers used copper straps to join the sections, creating watertight seams that would prevent moisture from entering between the skin and framework. The face, shipped in separate pieces, received particular attention. The features were assembled with meticulous care to preserve the subtle expressions Bartholdi had created. The 7 rays of the crown, each weighing approximately 150 pounds, were attached to the head structure in late July. The torch assembly presented the final challenge. The copper flame had been gilded with thin sheets of gold leaf to catch sunlight. Workers installed glass windows in the torch design, part of Bartholdi's original plan for illumination. By October 4th, the last copper section was in place. The scaffolding began coming down, revealing Liberty complete for the first time on American soil. Chapter 9. Unveiling Liberty, Dedication and Reception. The dedication ceremony for the Statue of Liberty took place on October 28, 1886. The event drew approximately 1 million spectators, nearly a quarter of New York's population at the time. Ships of all descriptions filled the harbor, from small pleasure craft to large passenger vessels, creating a floating audience surrounding Bedloes Island. The day began with a massive parade through Manhattan, featuring military units, civic organizations, and delegations from across America and France. The procession stretched over 5 miles through the city streets, requiring 4 hours to pass any given point. Businesses closed for the day, and buildings along the route displayed American and French flags. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, President Grover Cleveland arrived at Bedloes Island aboard the presidential yacht. The island itself accommodated only invited guests, approximately 2,000 dignitaries, including the statue's sculptor Frederick Auguste Bartholdi, diplomatic representatives, and government officials. Temporary seating surrounded the pedestal base, with covered platforms for officials. The ceremony began with speeches from distinguished guests, including Senator William Evarts, chairman of the American Committee, and Count Ferdinand de Lesseps, representing the Franco-American Union. The presenters spoke from a platform erected at the statue's base, their voices barely carrying over harbor winds to the closest audience members. The official transfer of the statue occurred when the French flag covering Liberty's face was removed, revealing the copper visage to the assembled crowd. This moment was meant to coincide with President Cleveland's acceptance speech but occurred several minutes early due to a miscommunication with the signal officer. President Cleveland formally accepted the statue on behalf of the United States, stating, "We will not forget that liberty has here made her home, nor shall her chosen altar be neglected." His speech emphasized the statue as symbol of international friendship rather than its Republican political origins. The ceremony notably excluded women from the official proceedings, despite their significant contributions to fundraising. The only women permitted on the island were Bartholdi's wife and the wife of the French ambassador. This exclusion prompted suffragist Matilda Joslyn Gage to organize a protest. Female representatives from various women's organizations chartered a boat that circled Bedloes Island during the ceremony, making their presence known despite their official exclusion. Following the speeches, a naval parade of vessels passed in review before the statue. Military ships fired salutes with cannon, their reports echoing across the harbor. As evening fell, fireworks illuminated the statue and harbor, with displays launched from vessels positioned around the island. Newspaper coverage of the dedication appeared worldwide. The statue received particular attention in France, where it represented the culmination of years of effort and the successful export of French Republican ideals to America. Within days of the dedication, Liberty began receiving her first public visitors, transported to Bedloes Island by regular ferry service established for this purpose. Chapter 10. Changing Meanings. From Political Symbol to Immigration Icon. The Statue of Liberty's symbolic meaning has evolved significantly since its dedication in 1886. The original intent, a celebration of Republican government and Franco-American friendship, gradually expanded to encompass broader themes of immigration, freedom, and American identity through specific historical developments and deliberate reinterpretation. When conceived by Laboulaye and Bartholdi, Liberty primarily represented political ideals. The broken chain at the statue's feet symbolized liberation from political tyranny. The tablet inscribed with July 4, 1776, commemorated American independence. The torch represented enlightenment. These elements reflected French Republicans' admiration for American democratic institutions rather than immigration themes. Emma Lazarus's sonnet, "The New Colossus," written in 1883 for an auction raising funds for the pedestal, introduced the Immigration Association. The poem, particularly its famous lines about huddled masses yearning to breathe free, presented Liberty as a welcoming figure for immigrants. However, the poem received little attention during the dedication ceremonies and remained relatively obscure for nearly 2 decades. In 1903, Lazarus's words gained prominence when a bronze plaque bearing the poem was mounted inside the pedestal. This installation occurred as immigration to America reached unprecedented levels, with Ellis Island visible from the statue, processing thousands of newcomers daily. The physical proximity of these two landmarks created a natural association, with Liberty becoming the first American symbol many immigrants encountered. The statue's copper exterior weathered over decades, gradually changing from its original reddish-brown to blue-green verdigris by 1930. This natural patination process, resulting from copper's reaction with harbor air, created the distinctive appearance recognized worldwide today. The color transformation paralleled the evolution in the statue's symbolic meaning. During the 2 World Wars, Liberty acquired additional significance as a symbol of American values opposed to European totalitarianism. Government propaganda featured the statue prominently in posters promoting war bonds and patriotic unity. Images of Liberty appeared on military insignia, reinforcing its role as representative of American ideals worth defending. In 1956, Bedloes Island was officially renamed Liberty Island by Act of Congress, formalizing the monument's central role in American identity. Major renovations followed for the statue's 75th anniversary in 1961 and the American Bicentennial in 1976, each accompanied by ceremonies that reinforced Liberty's evolving symbolism. The 1980s brought the most extensive restoration in the statue's history. Engineers discovered serious deterioration in the iron framework and copper skin, requiring a complete dismantling of the interior. The 2-year project, completed for Liberty's centennial in 1986, replaced the iron framework with stainless steel while preserving Bartholdi's original copper exterior. The statue's journey from political monument to immigration symbol represents a case of adaptive symbolism. What began as a specific statement about French and American republicanism expanded to encompass broader themes of freedom and opportunity. This evolution was neither accidental nor inevitable, but the result of deliberate interpretations that resonated with American self-perception at different historical moments. Today's understanding of liberty reflects this layered history, the original French political message now overlaid with immigration narratives and broader freedom themes. The statue remains both what its creators intended and what subsequent generations made of it, a rare instance where symbolic meaning expanded rather than shifted over time.